Welcome to Beyond the Game, Wealth Mastery for Athletes. I'm Kris Benson, private equity real estate investor, and I'm joined by 9-year NFL vet Alec Ogletree. Beyond the Game is a podcast where we will provide a playbook for financial growth both on and off the field. Join us each week as we'll have in-depth conversations with other pro athletes as they walk us through how they've created wealth beyond the game, both on and off the field. They're going to share their triumphs, lessons learned, and setbacks along the way so that you don't make the same mistakes. Join us. I think you're going to have a lot of fun. Welcome to Beyond the Game. Today we had NFL legend Ronnie Brown. Do you remember when they brought the Wildcat to the NFL? Ronnie Brown was the first guy to do it. NFL has evolved a ton since that. He had an incredible story. Ronnie has pivoted from a first-round draft pick, second overall pick. He is now a financial advisor here in the Georgia area. And to hear his story about how he went from focus on football to focusing on the business of self was incredible. So I think you're going to enjoy this episode. Stick with us.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Beyond the Game. I'm Alec Ogletree with my host, Kris Benson. We got a special guest here today, Mr. Ronnie Brown, Georgia Hall of Fame, high school Hall of Fame, and, future NFL Hall of Fame here. Hopefully soon. And, Mr. Wildcat man himself.
And the best dressed guest we've had.
Hey, best dressed.
Alec and I are wearing hoodies. We're going to have to step our game up if guys are showing up in suits.
Yeah.
Nah, man.
I feel underdressed. Got bling on the watch, suit. It's tough.
I had to work today, and then parent-teacher conferences, so
yeah, I get
there's
it.
a reason. I'm jealous. I'd rather switch.
Well, I appreciate you joining us.
No, thank you guys for sharing your platform. I appreciate
Ronnie,
it.
when I heard you were coming on, the first thing I wanted to know is, and we'll get into a little bit of your background, but the Wildcat offense to me when that started. So 2005, I graduated college in 2002, so I was watching the NFL fairly intently, and that was a huge shift. I want to understand, how did it start? Did offensive coordinator Alex said, he's like, dude, they just switched it at halftime one day. He's like, at halftime, somebody walked in the locker room like, we're running the Wildcat. Is that what happened?
No, man. The funny thing is, we had our quarterback coach that year had come from Arkansas. And so they had Felix Jones and
McFadden?
Darren McFadden and what's the big guy name? Their fullback. So they had those three guys. So they were doing it at Arkansas. And so when he came to Miami, it was myself, Ricky Williams, then we had Patrick Cobbs, and our fullback at the time was Lusaka Polite. And so, obviously, I think we've been chasing the goal since Dan Marino in terms of quarterbacks. And so, within my 6 years in Miami, I think I had 10 quarterbacks or so.
Wow.
10?
And so, during that time period, it was like, okay, we were 0-3, and we were going to New England. So, before that year, he had familiarity with the Wildcat or the Razor, whatever they called it. And so
They call it Razorback, right?
So we were in a meeting one day, and he was like, hey, guys, I got an idea. Like, what would you think about if we were to implement this offense? And he was like, which one of you two would want to be, like, the quarterback? I'm like, man, I ain't never played quarterback on any level. I'm doing it. And Ricky, he was good at the speed sweep stuff. So,
yeah.
It just made sense. And so I had baseball background growing up, so I felt comfortable throwing the ball. But it was really just the opportunity to play quarterback in the NFL. And so I was like, I'll do it. So
Did this happen like during training camp or something? Or like this was like during the season?
Yeah, toward the end of training camp, and then we put it in like the goal was to kind of put it in worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So it never worked.
Yeah.
Defense, like ever.
Yeah.
And so, they give us flack, and they like, oh man, here go this thing again, this high school offense. And so because they were putting us in worst case scenario, you never really got a true outcome. And so going into New England, it's like, one, it's New England, it's Bill Belichick, we're 0-3. So at the end of the day, it's like, what do you have to lose? Nobody expects you to do anything anyway. And so when they called it in the huddle, I'm like, wait, what? Like, and it was just like, all right, just don't mess it up. Like, don't mess up the snap, don't fumble. And so luckily we had success with it, and then we had more success with it, and then like, wait a minute, like New England didn't make the adjustments, and then we had some more success with it. And so it was fun, but the problem was we set the bar too high. So it was like, wait a minute, like now every time we do this,
every defense
people
scheme in there.
expect and so it was great. But then towards the end of the year, we ran into that buzzsaw. We played in the first round of the playoffs. We played the Ravens, and they blitzed every time we got in there.
0.
Well,
It's a Wildcat check.
Fun while it lasted, but it was good because it was an opportunity to do that. But then I'm like, it's like everything else. Like defense is so ahead of offenses in the league, and guys are on that side of the ball so much more athletic that you kind of always have to stay ahead of the curve and try to come up with things that are a little bit unorthodox. Like Patrick Mahomes, like some of the sidearm and all this stuff. Like, wait a minute, like we didn't see that. So that was one of those things. I was like, it's great, but let's just use it as like a different tendency. Like people go no huddle. Let's go that for a little bit, but the main thing still has to stay the main thing.
Mm-hmm. It changed the game. I mean, to some extent, changed the game, right? I mean, you saw offensive packages shift from that point, or at least the creativity around it seemed to shift.
Yeah. That's what the league, they do that. Everybody, it's like a copycat league. They call it copycat. Everybody started doing it.
Well, if it works.
Yeah. So it was cool.
It worked for them. It may not work for everybody.
They don't have Ronnie Brown back there.
I had some good teammates too, so it was cool. And we got excited about it because for me, it was in our running back room. Like, it was a sense of pride. Yeah. It's like, man, we got 3-4 running backs in the game at the same time. Like, and so, we were excited about the opportunity to do that.
Did you give it or hand it off on the first play? First time you ran it?
I think I kept it.
Kept it?
I ran power. It was just really running power play.
But you got the ball right now.
Yep. Yeah. I can get downhill and I can, dictate what the backside linemen are doing. So it was pretty cool.
For sure.
Cool experience. So going back, I guess, a little bit to, you growing up. You grew up here in Douglasville. Cartersville. Yeah. In Cartersville, Georgia. Football, was that the path the whole way? I mean, you said play baseball too. So football, baseball, or what were you thinking growing up?
Actually, my favorite sport was baseball. It just naturally came to me. It was easy. Like, I didn't do it all the time. But I was a big Braves fan. My grandfather watched the Braves a lot on my father's side. And so, we watched Braves games. My brother's favorite player was Terry Pendleton. And so just watching the Braves all the way through, it was really cool. I didn't really watch a lot of NFL. I watched certain guys. I had favorite players, like Barry Sanders was my favorite player all time. And so that was just kind of the thing. But sports was the outlet in my neighborhood and community. I started playing baseball at 5. Football was around 5 or 6. I was the youngest of most of my cousins. And so it was just the normal thing to do. And so I really wanted to go to Florida State and play baseball growing up. I was a big Florida State fan for some reason. But on the financial side of that, it was like the most logical and, reasonable decision was probably taking the football route. And so I knew once football became like the road, it was, okay, I want to be in the SEC. I want to be close to home. And so I actually committed to Tennessee before actually going to Auburn because I was going to play baseball and football at Auburn.
They were going to let you?
Yeah.
Did you have the shot at Auburn?
Yeah, so I actually got recruited by Auburn to play baseball. And so that was the only official visit I took because before that I was doing a bunch of major league tryouts. And so I have an older cousin that's in scouting now in baseball, and he was trying to talk me into doing the baseball thing. And I was like, man, I'm just the uncertainty of it and the timing of it and not going to college and taking those risks. I'm like, I don't know about this. And so I'm fairly conservative. I don't really take a lot of risk. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do this school thing. And, was mad at Georgia because Jim Dunn, didn't recruit me hard enough. And so all right. Jamal Lewis was the running back, him and Travis Henry at Tennessee. And I was like, man, I like the way these guys run the ball. So committed to Tennessee. And then a week before signing day, I had gone on an official visit to Auburn. And it was like, you know what, you can do both. Like my first stop was the baseball complex. And I was like, well, this is it.
Yeah. Two-sport. Play two-sport like that. They don't let a lot of people do that.
Yeah, I didn't get to do it. They told me I could, but when I got there,
they hit you with the okie doke. They say you ain't got time.
It was funny, but then I got there and it's like, well, because you're on football scholarship, you have to come to all football activities prior to going to baseball. And then my freshman year, we had Rudy Johnson come out of JUCO, and so he was starting running back. And then the next year, my buddy Cadillac comes in, so I'm riding the bench. I'm like, I can't even get on the football field. Like, I don't really have time to go to baseball. And so
that was it.
That was it.
It sounded like they forced you to make that decision.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I kick myself about today.
Georgia should have got you, man. Georgia. Yeah. They've lost. They used to let a lot of talent lead this state. And that's one thing I always hated was you see your top guys lead the state of Georgia. I'm like, man, what's going on? Like, how does that happen? Like,
yeah, I think we still do that, but it's more on the Falcon side now.
Yeah.
It's with,
yeah.
because I'm like, man, why y'all never draft any Georgia guys?
Never.
I don't know. Like,
Never.
So maybe it's a close proximity or you get a chance to see them too much. I don't know.
Man, you know how crazy that fan base would be? Just knowing you got all your, like, these dudes grew up around this whole state. Like, the following would be much better. To me, they'll win a lot more games with that. Just
call the GM. You guys have better connection than I do. I'm not going to make any difference.
They're going to have that pride. They take pride in their state, you know? We take pride in being from here.
Like you said, Alec, Georgia's got great athletes. Seems like they should recruit some.
Any sport.
Any sport.
Any sport you want to.
So at Auburn, kind of fast forwarding a little bit, you mentioned Cadillac. I mean, you had two, I guess, career-defining brands, right? Was it fair? Lightning and Thunder, and the Wildcat. I mean, not too many guys had both the collegiate and the pro, I guess, monikers to follow them around. Because if you say that to anybody now who followed football in the early 2000s, like, oh yeah, I remember Lightning Thunder. Because you were the first to do that too. Like, there wasn't a lot of guys who were kind of sharing the load like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, now that you say it, I didn't even think about it. Like, it's, you know, and at the time, you know, it's just me and my buddy playing. You know, we sharing time and, you know, we trying to help the team. And so, you know, Thunder, Lightning, Cadillac, Homer, like that was the thing. And then, you know, in the pros, it was, you know, Ricky and myself. So, you know, Ronnie and Ricky. So that was the whole thing. But I didn't even think about that. But it was pretty cool. You know, both of those guys' last name Williams too. So it was kind of like, man, I guess maybe there's a thing with those guys and, you know, having the last name Williams and being able to partner up.
Yeah. I had a great career for sure. So obviously you playing in college, right? And what did you graduate or you left?
I stayed and graduated.
You stayed and graduated in communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now, but obviously the draft and stuff for the NFL is coming up. Are you at the time in college, are you thinking about like, okay, I'm going to be a first rounder, I'm going to be second rounder, like what?
No, man, so my junior year, I got a 3rd round grade.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know.
That made you stay?
Yeah, so growing up, like, everybody's dream is just, I want to play in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't say I want to be a first round draft.
Yeah.
I just want the opportunity to play. And so at Auburn, given my road and even the fact that I was never the starting running back, you know, Rudy was that first year when I was there. And then, you know, Cadillac comes in. He's pretty much the starter throughout our career together. But I graduated the second semester of my junior year. And so with the 3rd round grade, you know, we got a new coordinator. And I was like, man, what's the worst that can happen? I don't really have, you know, to go to classes. I was debating on, you know, do I start trying to get an MBA or any of that stuff, or do I go to grad school? And then I was like, man, it's really only a semester. So what's the worst that can happen? So I sat down with the coordinator who came in at the time, and it was more, hey, man, I want to figure out how to get both of you guys in at the same time. I'm like, well, I don't really have anything to lose. I've already graduated. And so, you know, if I get this opportunity, it can boost my stock. And so after that year, you know, we go undefeated that season, which helped a lot. And then in terms of going out and working out, I was like, man, I'm going to do everything because I don't think people got a chance to see a lot of me in college. And so I had in the mindset of when we go to the combine, like I'm running, I'm lifting,
I'm doing everything,
doing all the drills. And so it's really in my mindset, I get to put a lot of pressure on people because I think they're underestimating that fact. And so that was just kind of my thinking going into it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Now, I mean, like you said, you play, go undefeated, that helps. And then first having that mindset of like, okay, when I go to these workouts, like I'm doing everything. I don't care whatever they ask me to do, I'm going to do it. I remember that jump for sure. And, so you get drafted, right, to Miami, right, first off. And second pick, right?
Yep.
First round, second pick. So I don't even, y'all was before the new CBA. I don't even remember at that time, y'all, what y'all was signing for.
They negotiated at that point, right?
Yeah, y'all could still negotiate.
Well, it was slotted, but Alex Smith was the first pick that year.
Okay,
right? Because they were debating it, and that was part of the issue. They was going between Alex and Aaron Rodgers to see who they were going to take for the first pick. Because Aaron well, Alex was a little bit younger, I think. And I think he was considered the more athletic guy coming out of college. And so it was like, okay, who do we take with the first pick? And so
where did Rodgers go?
24 to Green
he
Bay.
dropped down.
Yeah. And so with that whole thing, I'm like, man, I had zero idea that I was going in the first round.
Yeah.
Like, and so
Oh, really? Like
at the time, yeah, like my agent, he was like, hey, man, they invited you to the draft. And I'm like, I'm not going to that. Like, I'm not finna be one of those guys. Thinking about a guy that just had a 3rd round grade, I'm like, nah.
you didn't go?
No, so then he was like, if they're inviting you, you're probably gonna have a chance. And then going to the combine, I was like, okay, like it'll be a fun experience. And so my thinking in that was, man, from a small town, Cartersville, I get to take my parents, my godparents and family to New York for a week. It's like, man, it's a vacation. Like never really had a chance to do any of that stuff growing up. So I'm like, if worst come to worst, it was a great experience and I'm still getting drafted. So that's a win. And that was really the ultimate decision maker for me. It's like, I get to go to New York for them, just kind of hang out and kind of see the city a little bit. And so I let him, talk me into it. It's like, all right, we'll do it. And even in the draft, like the room that day, like I'm sitting there, Alex gets drafted. I'm looking across the table. Braylon Edwards is across there. I'm like, all right, he'll get drafted. In my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to end up somewhere because I hate cold weather too. I'm going to end up cold and it's going to be a miserable city. And then by that time, the agent taps me and is like, hey, man, like, it's the Dolphins. Like, Nick Saban want to talk to you. And I'm like, what? Like, stop playing. Like, we in the, like, this isn't the time to be joking and playing. And he's like, no, I'm serious. And then so hands me the phone and I'm like, wow. Like, Ronnie, would you want to be a Miami Dolphin? Absolutely. Like,
what you mean?
Right now, yeah. Like, so it was pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
It was a great experience.
So what you signed for? Like, what was your contract at that time?
So my signing bonus was $19 million.
Ooh.
19 million. And I had left college, and it's funny, like even now, like just sharing with a lot of the young guys that I talk to, I left school, I had $187 in my Regions account. And 3 months later.
187 to
It was funny. The funny story out of that, we played in the Sugar Bowl our senior year. And so Carnell, Cadillac, and then Carlos Rogers, we all rode down. Because, at that time, we all broke. So we put the little travel checks together and we drove to New Orleans. And those guys had a little bit of fun, and we had to put our money together to have enough gas money to get back to Auburn from New Orleans. And so it was just funny going from that. And then, all of us got drafted in the first round that year. So it was just kind of cool having that experience.
Most definitely. So when you coming out, did you have like a financial advisor? Did you have obviously you had your agent and stuff like that, but did you have somebody there that was, teaching? First off, did you know like anything, I guess, necessarily about money in a sense?
Absolutely not. Like I come from, a small community, and just transparency, like my parents never had any money. Yeah. So they had their own, struggles. Yeah. Just in terms of financially and, with extracurriculars in terms of abuses, substance abuse and stuff. So, not to dishonor them, but it was, coming from that environment and not being used to that. I just was like, man, I'm just going to try to get the best I can at football. And then the opportunity presents itself. Well, I get drafted where I do. So that's one of the most exciting times of your life. But then you also realize, like, wait a minute, like, I'm from a small town, went to Auburn, I get drafted to Miami, Florida, when somebody gives me $19 million as the first round pick.
In Miami.
And I'm like, so what do I do? Like, where do I start? And like you said, I had a financial advisor, I had an agent, but I didn't even understand the role that they played. Like, I didn't know, like, with that, how do you hire a financial advisor? How do you hire an agent? Yeah. It was more of a personality assessment. Like, these guys seem cool, but from a business perspective, I didn't know what questions to ask.
What to ask.
I don't know what your job description is. Like, I've never had any money, so what does it mean to help me manage my money?
So foundationally, did you have, like, taxes? Like Alec talks about when he got his check, he's like, where's the rest?
I didn't even look. Like, I didn't look at none of that stuff. Like, and it's weird to even say it now, but I never, like, coming from that environment, I never wanted to allow myself to be comfortable. Like, to feel like, oh, I made it. Because it was just like, okay, like, if you do the right thing, you keep your head down, you go to work, everything else will take care of itself.
But dangerous. You're trusting. Well,
and that's what happens to most guys, because you are somewhat afraid of that process and don't know enough about it. So it's like, well, I just take care of what I can take care of and not even knowing how to be involved. And it's like, okay, I just hopefully do the right things, hire some people that I can trust, hopefully, and then they help with that process until you gather enough education and information how to help manage that or how to realize how to put more people or understanding those jobs and responsibilities. But for the most part, most guys, it's that selection process. It's not even knowing what that responsibility or obligation is. It's you're a football player. I know how to do this really well. I'm going to do that. And hopefully the people that I meet with, because everybody's getting financial advisor, if I'm coming after Alec, hey, Alec had a financial, I guess I need a financial advisor. Like, oh, well, all the agents are talking to me. I need an agent because that's the process.
So mechanically, did literally money just go into a bank account somewhere and you're like, yeah, all right, here we go?
Yep. I never looked at the signing bonus. Like, people like, man, like, how did you put, I'm like, I didn't really look. Like, I didn't, and that's sad to say now that as, you know, a responsible young man.
Yeah, but you're 21.
But it's like, yeah, like, looking at it, I was like, my mindset was I just never want to allow myself to feel like I was comfortable enough to not have to work hard or go in. And so.
But you had a reason for not looking. It wasn't just like, I ain't going to look at it, but I know I got it here. And, you know, like you said, you didn't want to feel comfortable. So, like, you doing it, you not looking at it for a reason.
Right.
And use it as motivation.
Yeah.
Right.
Not necessarily just like, yeah, I made this money, it's here, but I ain't know what to do with it or whatever.
Yeah, and I wanted to know. I was somewhat afraid of that process of getting comfortable.
No, that's true, because, I mean, I just know from my experience myself, just like, you don't know that process. Like, you don't know this person from a can of paint. Like, you're like, man, now you want to represent me? I've never met you. I just met you like a week ago. Right? And so it's building that trust. So, I mean, I see that, like you say, you see it happen all the time. Was that something where you sat down with them and you just kind of felt comfortable with the person that you...
Did you get introduced to them? Was there a referral?
Right.
Well, it was, I mean, as you know now, like, even, like, we didn't have social media.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, these guys come around campus and, you know, I asked, like, for me, Takeo Spikes was kind of like the older guy. And so he used to talk to me, reach out, you know, and kind of was like the big brother figure.
Been through it.
And so I'm just kind of like, okay, like, all these guys that got my phone number and they're calling. I'm like, okay, how do you start this process? Like, oh, this guy seems cool on the phone. Like, okay, I'll give you a meeting. But that was really it. And then I'm asking Takeo, like, hey, man, like, you know, I really respect you. Like, who do you have? Like, and, you know, that in that situation, that guy reached out. And so I'm like, how is he? Like, is he cool? You know, do you like him? And so there was like 3 or 4 guys that I was like, okay, I'm going to take a meeting with him and see who I connect with and see what that looks like. My parents and, you know, people around me are very influential. I'm a big family person. So I'm like, whoever I choose, you know, they have to meet my parents. They have to get a good feel for them. And so those relationships are important. And so that was really how I went through it. But it was more of a personality assessment than it was me sitting down and saying, hey, so what's your job description? What do you do? What's that strategy? I knew nothing about how to talk about it.
But that's what you knew. Right. And we've had a lot of guests on here. It's that relationship. And to Alec's point, the people who can basically who've gone before you and can say, hey, like, here are 2 or 3 guys that I trust.
Yeah.
This is somebody you can trust. Because unfortunately, so many people just get connected for the reason you just said. They seem cool.
Yeah.
You know, not strategy-based, track record-based, trustworthiness. It's just seems like a good fit. You don't know any better. Write a check and, you know, money disappears.
Like, I got it. I got it. And move on. So I guess kind of keep moving forward. You got your first deal.
Wait, what'd you buy?
Well, my first purchase was my parents' home. Like, so I bought them a house. And then for me, I always, never really been a car person, but I always liked the Range Rover. And so when I could get a car, because I had a 1996 Honda Accord.
You could probably still be driving. It'd still be working.
Yeah. And so it was, and we shared it, like, even when I was in college, like, the rule for me when I was in the dorm, like, you could take my car, you just had to bring it back with a full tank of gas. Like, that was the rule. So everybody drive the car. You know, but it was, we shared cars. Like, that was the thing. And so I was like, okay, I get to get a chance to get a car and get the one that I want. Like, that's the one that I want. And it was kind of like one of those things, you get it.
For sure.
I'm not being a car person, so I'm like, all right, it was cool.
It was cool.
But it wasn't what I thought. I'm like, all right, did that thing, checked it off. Now it's like, okay.
That's almost everything in life. Almost everything, you like get it and you're like, all right, that was cool.
You more enjoyed the process of it.
Right.
I think.
Right. That was I think it was the freedom of working hard for something and earning it and then being able to get it and then say, okay, I appreciated it, but
the expectation is always better than the reality.
Right.
The expectation of getting it and that the build up beforehand.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
Sure. But it's worth it at the end. You know, he said you got what you wanted. And then, okay, so like I was saying, you signed your first contract, you bought your mom a house. Were you thinking about like stuff outside of football at the time on like your first deal? And then, you know, if so, what were those things that you were thinking about? Or was it just strictly like, I'm going to put my money in the bank account over here and I'm going to go just play football and I'm going to, you know, that little off season you have a couple months, like, I'll see what my financial people are talking about, you know, for a little while. And if it get done if something, you know, kind of happens, you know, during that off season, you know, it happens. But most of the time, it's like I see it, and then football season comes, you just shut it off again.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I didn't even know. Like, it was just really drinking through a fire hose. Like, I don't, you know, with the process, you know, like when you get out of school, you go train, do combine, do OTAs, do mini camp, do training camp, the season starts.
Yeah.
So it's everything just kind of taking it in all at once.
Yeah.
And so, you know, with that, I'm like, I don't even know what to expect. I just want to be as good as I can in football.
For sure.
And so, you know, it's like, okay, as a first round pick, these are expectations. So, like, I just need to put all my time and energy in that. That was another part of the reason I didn't look. Like, the financial stuff, I'm like, I don't need a lot. Like, I don't really go out, hang out a lot, you know, experienced and enjoyed it. But for me, it was, I want to be successful in terms of football. And the off season, trying to figure that out. And you try to look at other guys and see, hey, what are you going to do this off season? You know, but it's trying to formulate that plan, but you don't really know. It's everything's all new. And so, like, what do I do in the offseason? Do I stay here in Miami? Do I go back to Atlanta? Do I work out? Do I train? Do I go back to Arizona and train? Like, what does that look like in terms of formulating that plan and not having somebody to really walk you through that's
managing
going through
your time
is you know, a challenge. And it's, you know, that first time in the first offseason, it's like, what do I do? When do I stop working out? How long do I not work out? How long do I, you know, give myself to recover?
The teams don't have I guess I would envision, right? Like, the teams want you to be best prepared for the following year. There's not like a plan where they're like, hey guys, here's what we suggest: nutrition, fitness, you know, recovery. This is what you should be doing in your body in the off season. That's not part of the package that they're sending you home with, I guess.
You know, you have hurdles and you have like responsibilities. Like, hey, this is your weight when you come back. You know, so you have to report at this. They give you a off-season workout plan, but in terms of the details, that's the part of being a professional that not many people talk to you about. And it's like, well, how do I, you know, as a young man, be a professional? What does that mean? Like, how do I
at 22
establish that? You know, and there's no how-to manual of, well, you got this money. Do you take a trip? Do you enjoy it? Do you go home? Do you get an apartment here in this city? Do you go and what are you training? And
so what were you thinking? Like, what was your mindset?
Just all over the place. It's like, well, what do I do? And luckily for me, you know, those veteran guys were Jason Taylor, Zach Thomas, Junior Seau, and just kind of trying to, I believe, like, success leaves clues. And so trying to find people that have been successful on that level, but also—
You need to say that again.
Success leaves clues?
Yeah, you need to say that again so the folks hear that.
Tony Robbins.
Okay.
That's the Tony Robbins one.
Yeah. So so you look at that stuff and you try to figure out how does that work for you or how do you implement some of those things, but you just don't know. And it's that year one. That's why it's really important having the right people around you who understand your, you know, situation in terms of how things work. And it changes, you know, based on family dynamic, based on, you know, where you come from. Like, some guys, it's hard to go back home because you've kind of outgrown that, or, you know, you in a different situation. And so you need to make sure from a responsibility standpoint, like, how do you continue giving yourself the tools to be successful? And, you know, it's, you know, I think a lot to navigate through for a young man with a lot of new money, with a new situation, and trying to be successful in a career that really doesn't last that long. Even if it does last, 15 years or so, you're still relatively young in life, like 35 years old. So you got another.
Now almost
hopefully,
nobody's doing that.
Yeah, 35 years to live. Like, so you haven't even done this for half of your lifetime. So, it's a lot to digest, at once when you don't really have a how-to.
So if you think about your career in the NFL, and you played 8 years, 9 years? 10?
Yeah.
Okay, so you played 10 years so as a running back, 10 years in the league is forever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Alec always told me NFL not for long, which I get. You guys put yourself through hell. But so you had an incredible career, Pro Bowl player. You made 30-ish if you look online, right? Career earnings.
Hypothetically, yeah, with pre-tax and pre-lifestyle and pre-fees and agents and
people don't understand that.
Yeah, taxes is a big start of it. I didn't understand when we started the podcast. You guys are paying tax in every state you play, which you played in Florida for at least half the season for a while in your career, but then you played in California, which is another story. But you're paying tax in every one of those states. You're getting smoked on that, and you're W-2 employees.
Yeah.
So you don't have a lot of ways to help shield the income that you guys are earning, which is challenging.
Yeah. And it's, and it's interesting. And even now, like, a lot of guys don't understand that, like, from a tax implication, like, what does that look like? W-2 versus 1099. Like, and then you start even talking about credit scores and all these things. And it's all new to a lot of young men that, come from certain backgrounds or, socioeconomic upbringing. Like, it's just new information.
Sure.
So you pair that with, wait a minute, and you want me to be successful in this field, and you want me to manage my time, I think to the best of my ability, because I come out of college where pretty much all my day was structured. If you got out of a point where you passed study hall, then it was like, okay, I know I got to go to class. My classes are all in the morning, so afternoons can be dedicated to football, to where 4 o'clock you done for the day, and I'll see you tomorrow. And so trying to manage that stuff. And so it's a lot that goes into it that, people don't think about. You see them on Sundays and Thursdays and Mondays now, but, managing all of that and trying to manage the business of self now, it's a lot, because you become the CEO of your business.
And when did you start to think about that? Like, when did you start to think about, I love what you just said, the business of self. I've never heard that before, but you're right. Like, Ronnie Brown and Alec Ogletree are running the business of them, right? Football's part of it, but then they got the whole other part of it to make sure that they can take those earnings and support themselves, their families, whomever. When did you start to think about that? Was that like a shift in either maturity, age, or did somebody else say, hey, Ronnie, football, but there's going to be a beyond the game?
Yeah, it's a gradual process, and it's just tied to who you're tied to, who you're connected to, and who you can learn, who you can get information from. Like, I try to encourage young guys to talk to veterans who they see are doing things the right way. But then it's your team around you, those agents, those advisors. What does your family structure look like? How do they pour into you? How do you, do you have any mentors? And you got to be open to receiving the information. But for me personally, it was just trying to watch, and it was just gradual. It's like, oh, this guy does this. This guy does this. Like, and coming off an injury in 2007 where I tear my ACL, it's like, wait a minute, what if this don't work out? Like, what if this is it? Like, then you start thinking about a lot of things. And even during that time period, like, where all the phone calls stop and you rehabbing by yourself, and you're like, man, wait a minute. Like, if all this stuff goes down the drain, like, what does that look like? And it's, you start reevaluating.
But I'm still me. I'm still me.
Like, I'm still me, but they don't care. Like, hey.
It's like them phone calls
they
stop.
ain't coming,
Nobody checking on you, nobody calling for tickets. And at that time, a lot of guys deal with that. It's like, wait a minute. Like, you really got to face reality. Like, if this is it, like, what else or who else am I outside of this game? And a lot of guys can't answer that question, especially early on.
But you're asking somebody to do that how old were you? So you did it 2007, you said?
Yeah.
But you're 24. Right? 23, 24?
Yeah.
You're asking someone to ask pretty deep philosophical questions at an age where, 24-year-olds usually aren't thinking like that.
Yeah. And the challenge is, I think, sorry about that, like, it's in society, we assume that financial success equals responsibility. Like, and so young men get paid a lot of money, but we assume that because of their financially being successful, that they're also responsible. We forget the age of a lot of these guys. It's like, wait a minute. Like, if you give anybody a large amount of money at this age, there's going to be some mistakes, especially if there's no guidance, direction, understanding or education. Like, and so I think we tend to forget that. And it's just like, oh, well, you got a professional career. It's like, yeah, but I'm 23 years old trying to manage a business and be a CEO of a company of myself where I'm making millions, but trying to figure out how to do everything the right way. It's like, that's a tall task for, a lot of people that don't come from great structures or upbringing.
I think it's why we're here, right? I mean, this is part of the conversation that Alec and I had was, well, let's try to put something together where that 23-year-old who's ready, who's ready to hear it, has a community of people he can tap into, or an episode of Ronnie Brown saying, hey, success leaves clues, right? And maybe that's the thing he takes away. And he's like, all right, there's a guy in my locker room who's doing it right. I'm going to go follow him. I mean, that's the crazy part to me. Alec's 31. He just retired, right? I'm 43. You're almost my age, but most people make all their money 35 to 60.
Right.
You guys made the most of your money, or the biggest earning power in your professional sports career is from 20 to 30, which is insane. No one knows what to do with money when you're 24, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's a clown.
Yeah.
And especially if you don't have that foundational knowledge to come up with you. That, for me, when we started talking about it, and all the guys said the same thing, they're like, we just don't know.
Yeah. And it's a challenge because you have a lot of people telling you what to do. They don't tell you how to do it. Like, it's like, oh, well,
they ain't teaching you really.
You do this. And it's like, okay, but how do I do this?
Yeah.
Like, 23 years old, I just came off a college campus where I get to go buy my first house, and I get to do that, and I got to look at interest rates, and I got to look at, comps, and knowing.
You get a mortgage.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute. Like, most people don't do that in their 20s. And so that's something that usually have grown into, you get a starter home, and, 30s and 40s, you may get that dream home, whereas you come out of college, you have the bandwidth to buy your dream home and get your dream car without even understanding what that is, to have a mortgage and, how to qualify and going through a real process. Those are things that you don't go through.
No, for sure. So I guess next question would be, as you going through, so I guess usually, or I guess you kind of said it too, but my question was going to be like, what transpired in your career that forced you to be like, that forced you to be like, man, you know what? Now you're at UBS as a FA and all this stuff, right? And so I guess, was that something that you started doing while you were still playing, or was it something that you kind of transitioned into, after you got done playing, you just kind of was like, okay.
Nah, man, it's, and it was, for me, it was more serendipitous discovery, because I never planned on being, in wealth management and having a role. It was just forced by, going through that process myself and realizing I didn't understand it. And so that was the biggest challenge for me, is like, how do I do this? But then going through that, I also realized, like, wait a minute, there's so many guys like myself who don't know about this process. So how can I not only educate and learn about it myself, but then also help other people do it? And so that's where a lot of the motivation came from. It was, okay, like, this is something that you need to know. For me, it was just early in my career. I don't want to be one of those stories that we read about. But then how do I not be one of those stories? I don't know. So now I got to start trying to find that information. And so luckily pursuing that, being around the right people, and really just getting lucky, because sometimes you just don't know. Like, I don't know who to go to. And, and so just trying to find that information and looking at younger guys and some of my college teammates and, other guys in the locker room that you see. Unfortunately, we make these mistakes and these decisions, or, I wouldn't even say mistakes. I say missteps, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out how to do those things without any guidance, it's like, okay, like, how do I position myself? And so luckily through all of that and acquiring that information and personal experiences, it's just, okay, here is where I am, and it became more of a purpose. And part of that was, too, what I shared about my upbringing. I never really was a huge football guy, like NFL, like watching sports.
I was the exact same way.
And so it was more, I knew, like, for me, sports was my escape and my opportunity. And so I kind of used it as my transportation, not my destination, because I knew it wasn't the end goal. And so it was like, okay, how do I use this to get into what I would like to be doing or, more of that purpose. And so I felt like it was just a natural gravitation of I went through these experiences. I feel that I can kind of navigate and help other guys through that same situation.
What's the misstep that you're talking about? So when you talk about some of the missteps that young guys make, and I'm sure you made them, yeah. I've certainly made them on my side. What's the best one? What's the worst investment or one of those missteps that somebody else can listen to and say, I'm not going to do that?
Yeah. So like I said, like getting out of school, getting to Miami, signing a signing bonus for $19 million at 22, 23 years old. I went out and I bought a diamond gold grill. Like it was all diamonds. And I didn't even wear it that much. Like at first, like I wore it and I couldn't keep my mouth closed.
What you spend on that?
I think it was probably about 15, 20,000. Like for a
grill.
And it was, and it was one of those things just not knowing, but being in the environment, being, I think in the locker room of, okay, you have this money, but like how do you manage it? How do you steward this without that? And you seeing guys usually in the locker rooms, the ones that are most influential have the worst habits because they have some of the nicest stuff. So it's like, okay, well,
you
got drafted in the first round, and then you got family telling you, man, you got drafted, you got money, you need to get this. And you're like, maybe I do. And so, some of those things happen.
What is a grill like a mouthpiece that sits on your teeth?
Yeah, pretty much.
So just top and bottom.
I just had a bottom. It was you go in, you get a mold, and then they mold it, and then they put the diamonds in the mold.
So it's a mouthpiece. I mean, it's just like wearing a mouthpiece, but it's just golden diamonds.
To some degree.
To some degree, yeah.
And then you just wear it around to be flashy, and then at night you take it out and put it next to your, it's like dentures. You take it out and put it on your nightstand.
Yeah. Is that what you do? Yeah. So and it's, and it's some of those things too, like understanding, like coming from those environments.
Do you still have it?
It's in a safe somewhere because I can't do anything with it.
You should have wore it here.
You can't even
the watch.
I can't even fit it anymore.
The watch and then
teeth ain't even the same.
Yeah, I done got my teeth like, and it's kind of like one of those things. Like you look at it and you're like, boy, that was dope. But it's also a reminder of
what you was at that time too.
Yeah, that evolution part of it. Of golly, that was dope.
That's the worst investment you made. You still have it. That's not even that bad.
Yeah, but I can't do anything with it.
Probably sell it
to who? Who wants my?
I don't know. Scrap.
Now you're in the Hall of Fame now.
Yeah, that's right. Georgia Hall of Famer grill.
Yeah. So it's
eBay.
It's just certain things that you don't realize.
That's the worst thing you lost money on?
Yeah, and I probably lost, a pair of earrings at practice.
He told you he was very conservative, man.
He did say that.
From the beginning.
I just was scared.
That was I invested in a restaurant, Ponzi scheme.
No, I wasn't doing any of that stuff. I was more scared of that stuff. Like that was like with the jewelry, it was more of a, okay, I know I like this stuff. Probably shouldn't have gotten it. But yeah, with all of that stuff, I'm still small town, really cautious. And so a lot of that stuff I don't know about. So I tend to kind of stay away from it. And so even with the young guy, I'm telling him, if you don't know something, just don't do anything. Like if you don't know anything, just don't do anything. You can't do anything.
Alec talked about it, and I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, you are a professional athlete, so you're looked upon as you know what you're doing. You just got a ton of money. And so Alec talked about a story with him personally where he's like, I got this. I know how this works.
I tried to invest in the suit company. I have my whole suit.
And you didn't even what you sold? Did you?
No, I ain't did. I haven't done none of that.
Is that what he just asked? Did you sew?
I'm just saying, what was the gravitation to the suit company? Like,
so what happened was, this was 2017, 16, something like that. And basically, this suit guy came, and one of the agency I was with one time before, and they end up sending me this guy that made suits with her, right? And he basically was like, I want to gift you a suit. You know how people just send you stuff, whatever. Yeah. So he basically gifted me a suit or whatever. And then he was like, man, I want to do it for the whole team or whatever. So basically I got him to do it for the whole team. Gave everybody a suit, right? So we kind of started building this relationship, whatever, cool, whatever. He came, hung out with us and everything. I'm like, okay, dude, cool, whatever. We didn't really talk no business at the time, but I get traded to New York, right? Get traded to New York and end up, I remember one day, calling. He's like, man, okay, listen, got this like business idea. You know, we start your own suit.
The
Like I
Ogletree.
made a whole like little emblem and everything, like logos and all this stuff, right? It end up, they was like, okay, it's cost like $250,000 to basically get it started and whatever we need, right? So again, at that point, I'm like, I didn't even tell nobody. Like I didn't run it through my people, whatever. I'm just like, okay, yeah, I got this. Like,
Yeah.
he cool. Like, nothing's gonna go wrong with it. End up, I swear, I wrote him the check, and it went 2 weeks later. The NFL sent a email out like, this dude's a con artist. He's this, that, and other. You know, all of
You're
this
just
stuff.
laughing, Ronnie, because it was Alex.
Money gone.
It's unfortunate. You hear a lot of those stories.
Money gone.
Yeah.
But I think what Alex said that really stuck with me was like, I got this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're the man. I mean, you're a professional athlete at the top of your career making a bunch of money. It's hard to let the ego or not let the ego kind of cloud your judgment. Like, yeah, I got this.
Yeah.
For sure.
And to your point, Ronnie, I think that's where having the people and the team, and in Alex's situation, he didn't consult anybody. Your wife, you said you did ask your wife.
I did. Well,
And she thought it was a terrible idea.
yeah, she was against it the whole time. And I just
went.
went on there being hard-headed.
Yeah.
Being hard-headed.
It was going to be a nice suit, though.
Did you at least get an extra suit out of it?
Man, yeah, I still got the suits.
You can't wear them suits.
I know.
Like they wide legs. Like,
Nah, they were all tailored to me and everything. It was tailored suits. Like, everything was...
Ogletree brand.
The
on it.
Ogletree.
Yeah, it was going to
And
be
this guy
nice. They got me.
Went to the Bahamas on you.
I don't know where he went.
Wait, the best part, Alex not telling. He reached back
Yeah,
out.
then
He reached back out to Alec, was like, I hope we still be boys.
Maybe like a year later, he like, what's up, brother? Or something like that. I hope I can still call you brother or something like that. Like,
You call me whatever you want to. Come on over here.
hey, dude, bring me running that check back. That's all. You know what I mean?
Ronnie,
What?
what was the other end of that spectrum? What was the best investment you made? I have two parts to that question. Financially, what was the best investment you made, knowingly or not? Maybe it was your financial advisor.
Even like now, I tell the guys some of the best investments that I made was the ones that I didn't make, because you get so many people coming at you, and there was a few, people that I had interviewed that just kind of looking at that I didn't go with, and I'm like, oh, that guy went to prison, that guy went to prison,
Really?
and she went to prison, and that was the best thing. It's like, golly,
Those were advisors, or who were those people?
Yeah, so it was three. So,
Wow.
and a lot of those people like motivating factors for me even, doing what I do because of that and seeing how, you get recruited and how all of those things happen, but they don't have the best interest outside of that.
Sure.
And then you see the aftermath of it. And then, guys can't recover from situations like that. And so,
You get hurt, right? You guys were lucky to have a long-standing career, but, 2007, that could have been it.
Yeah,
And if you had made a bad decision at that point, that's it.
sure. Yeah.
So was there, from a financial mindset in the playing career, and then I want to transition to what you're doing now because I think the pivot's been incredible, but did you think about a number? Did you and your financial advisor, a couple of guys we've talked to had said like, hey, get me to $5 million and then I can create a passive income stream for you that, basically you can live off the rest of your life and we never touch the principal. Was there, in your mind, was there ever a goal to say, hey, I'm trying to get to X?
No, because I didn't understand it enough that much. And so I wasn't even thinking post-career, I need this amount of money to live off of and, having a withdrawal rate or a burn rate of this. It was more so of, I just hope I'm doing the right thing. So when I retire, I put myself in position to be okay and have a sustainable lifestyle. Not that, I'm not a flashy person, but you just hope you're doing the right thing.
So for the girl.
Yeah. And so, and even with that, like even with earrings, like I probably haven't worn like really like earrings and all of that stuff since 2008, 9. And so it's just, I think as you grow and you learn and you say, okay, like those things were missteps. And luckily, like you said, I was able to recover from doing dumb stuff like that. But it's really on you that as a, and I think that's we were a lot more honest with a lot of these young men and said, listen, man, when you get to college from this point on, everything that you do is performance-based. And everything that happens to you after this point is dictated by how well you perform, whether that's draft, college.
Because that's life.
And that's
outside of professional sports too, right? Like my world is performance-based. Investors invest with us because we do well. If we don't do well, they don't invest with us.
And that's the challenge now, because we're not as honest with a lot of, and if I go in a locker room now and I ask guys like, man, how many of you guys think you're going to make it to the NFL? With the exception of, maybe a couple guys that don't get much playing time, may walk on a little bit. And so with that exception, like probably the majority of guys are going to raise their hand, not knowing that, hey man, it's really only 1% of you guys that will make it or get an opportunity. But even beyond that, it's probably 1% of the 1% will make enough to where you can live the rest of your life off this money. And we're not realistic. And it's not about shooting dreams, but it's like, hey man, like let's just be realistic with this opportunity and kind of have real hard conversation, because I think that's where, the disappointments happen, is when you're not realistic with the opportunity.
So you finished in 2014.
That was my last season, yeah.
And transitioned to financial advising at that point. Did you know that was the path you were going?
No, so during that early part of my process, I wanted to start acquiring that information. So I was like, man, where do I start? I don't know anybody in my immediate circle who's even had enough money, whereas, opening up and asking those questions, and there was probably people that I could have asked, but, just really being fearful of not knowing. And part of it is the ego of, like, who do you go say, hey, I don't really know this. Can you help me out?
Was your financial advisor that guy?
To some degree, but it wasn't. It's weird. Like, it wasn't one of them conversations that, like, the relationship, it wasn't that I'm like, hey, man, like
how do I
teach me this business? Like, that wasn't something that, I was mature enough to do, I think.
Yeah.
And so
most people, they're just not going to have that conversation with them like that.
Right. Like, teach me this business. Unless there's a pre-existing relationship and somebody's been in the family, but more times than not, the new relationship, you're not mature enough to say, hey, listen, I don't know this business. Can you teach me this business? And so that takes a lot. But then the other end of it, early in my career, so I was like, okay, how do I chase this information? So I got lucky and got around a group of guys, and we started a community bank. For me, it was an investment.
Wait, what's that mean? A community bank, meaning like you guys funded a local bank?
Yeah. And so
when you say a group of guys, other players?
No,
guys
so it was a guy from my hometown who was a doctor who had some relationships with people in South Florida. And then I think the mayor of the time of South Florida, of Fort Lauderdale, a couple other business guys, a couple restaurant owners, a couple different guys. One guy was in banking. And we got together and we started a community bank. I had zero idea what was happening, but for me, it was, it was an investment, but it was, I get to acquire this information and be around business people and getting information. And so in that time, I learned that, hey, wait a minute, like this information isn't so intricate that I can't learn it. It's just I've never had exposure or access to it. And so that was really the catalyst. I'm like, man, I like this stuff. And that was while you were playing? Yeah.
Okay.
And so just doing that, it kind of led to and sparked this whole transition. And then being in that I didn't know that, and then seeing guys come in the locker room and saying, wait a minute, I'm not the only. It's guys every day that struggle with this, that don't even know it. But we don't know how to address it. We don't have those conversations in the locker room. And so I was like, So in 2014, as you get older, like, because I did the same thing, like with guys, you're doing your benefits, and it's like, hey, man, what did you pick? What did you choose? Like,
you mean like health insurance? Like when you say benefits, you mean like health insurance?
Yeah, like NFL benefits, your 401k, like with the allocations for investments, like all that. You like, man, wait a minute. Like, hey, man, older guy, like help me out. Like, what'd you pick? So that was kind of how it happened. So then at that point, I kind of was that guy sometimes in the locker room.
Guys were coming to you.
And I'm like, I really don't know. It's just this is what I'm doing. This is what I've been doing. And so in that transition, it was like, okay, what do I do now? Like, that first year, like retiring, I'm like, okay, I know I want to do something else, but how do I? A guy that didn't go to school for finance, like
at that point, did you have enough money to never work again?
Yeah, I was fine. Yeah.
Okay.
But then it was like, I had a son at that time, who's my oldest. He's 10 now. But even at that, I was like, it wasn't, like I said earlier, like football wasn't it for me. So I knew I wanted to do something else. I just didn't know how to get into finance. I didn't go to school for finance. And so that was going to be a big hurdle. And so I leaned on the easy thing is I met a guy at a golf tournament. And then he was like, hey, man, would you be interested in doing some radio? And I was like, sure. And so I started doing some radio down at Auburn in the fall. That was my way of getting out of the house.
Yeah.
I'm like,
play-by-play or color man in the game.
So I'm like, so I do sideline and I do, sideline reporter. But I'm like, what do I do? Like, that was just to get out of the house and have that escape and do something. And then so I had the conversation with my financial advisor at the time. I was like, hey, man, like, what would it look like if I were to try to get into this business? And so, it was kind of like, he's like, no, are you serious? I was like, no, I'm serious. Like, what would it look like? And so we started having conversations. I talked to the manager. He's like, hey, man, this is something that's doable. I'm like, oh, perfect. And so what does that look like? And so typically timelines, like most people who go to school for finance, they license registrations in the first 6 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, as the competitive part of me, I'm like, wait a minute, 6 months. 6 months it is. Like, I'll try it. Like, and so
that's easy.
Yeah, so I dropped my son off in the mornings to pre-K, and then I go in and study. Like, I lock myself in the room for a few hours, and then 6 months later, I had to drive over to Athens, and I'm in there with a bunch of college athletes taking, my licensing exam. Do that, and then do another exam and do.
Is that for like CFA or?
So that was my Series 7.
Okay.
And then I took the 66, and then by that time now I'm back in test taking mode because I have been out of school since 2004, and that was like 2018, at the beginning of 2018 for that. And so then I'm like, okay, well, life, accident, and health insurance, because people say you need to get this while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, perfect. And then so just doing all of those things, and then just kind of like navigating through and then trying to figure out even, through this lay of the land, like what that looks like. Like, because it was, I ain't gonna lie, I probably would never, and I usually tend to say never, but I never want to take those exams again. Because it was just the timing of it. But for me, coming from the world that I come from, like in that, I didn't even understand the verbiage and the language. And so I have Investopedia open on one side, then I have my computer trying to break down the sentences on the other side to study. And so, because a lot of the acronyms, the wording, I'm like, I didn't know it. Like,
it's a different language.
And so, it was going through that process, which was like really humbling, and it was, it was a challenge. But come out on the other end, I was like, okay, cool. Like, and so
I got it.
It just felt good to come out of that and being, you get that label as an athlete and then being recognized and then go challenge yourself to do something that, I guess is considered difficult to be able to manage that. It was
good for you. So it's not easy to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a complete pivot of who you are, right? Your whole life to that point. Like you said, it wasn't always football, but that's who you were. I mean, you were a football player.
Yeah. And I didn't know what I was getting into. That was the other thing. Like having to take that leap of faith or coming out of a 10-year NFL career, being a former first-round draft pick, number 2 pick, to starting from the bottom of trying a new profession, not even knowing that, if I'm going to pass these exams or what that looks like. Like, yeah, man. So it was a challenge. Just
but
even in that.
I think you guys, you underestimate how valuable the skill set you have, which is the grind. Alec just mentioned it, right? Like what you do, what you did for a living is incredibly hard. And the only way you got through it was you put the work in. I mean, you guys are God-gifted talent as well, but you worked alongside of it. And that's no different in anything. I could work really hard. I'm never going to be a professional football player, but that skill set is transferable to everything. If you want to learn finance, but I think the point you're making is you have to go get it. It doesn't just happen. Like that's the piece that I think most people miss in everything is like, well, I want this. It's like, okay, well, here's how you do it. Now go put the work in for a few years. And, that people only see the end point. They're like, I want to do that. It's
right.
Like, well, you got to grind first. You got to put your 10,000 hours in to be that expert.
Right. So it was a great experience. I'm happy I did it. I feel like, this is my purpose. I think that's the reason I went through everything that I went through and going through that pathway. But, none of it's been easy, but it's like you said, everything worth doing is probably going to be difficult. And so now it's just, okay, like continuing to grow and evolve. And I think that's the message, even talking to a lot of the young guys, the same thing. Like, don't be scared to take chances in terms of who you are outside of being an athlete. Because I think that's
Where's
what
that
you
come
do,
from,
but that's
Ronnie?
not who
Where's
you are.
that come from?
I put that guard down.
Yeah.
I put that guard down and be vulnerable and really have that honest, true conversation with yourself. Like, man, I don't know this. I need to find this help. Like, go ask.
Yeah.
Where's that come from for you? Because not everybody's got it, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's my upbringing, like in the community that I grew up in, and my parents and my godparents. Like it was just, I don't know, just realizing. Even just the last couple of years, it's been more of accepting who you are, but also be willing to grow, like in that, and not being scared of. You know, I think a lot of times we allow people to label us, like whether it's an athlete or non-athlete. It's, oh, well, you're good at this one thing. This is what I know you for. That's all you can do. And a lot of times, you can tell because it's reflective of the community you grew up in. Because it's like, oh, well, Alec, you were the best athlete growing up. I knew you were going to be an athlete, but then you tell them, well, I'm a business owner and I do these other things. Like, wait a minute. Like,
they get confused.
And so I think trying to, I tend to think of it in my mind as finding that and what. Like, well, yeah, I was an NFL athlete, but and what? Like, and so now I'm in wealth management, but what else? Like, and what? Like, you know, I mentor, you know, high school guys, like, but and what? And so not being afraid to just continue to grow. And I think it's just how I grew up, and just, you know, that being a big part of who I am, and, you know, really embracing it over the last few years of saying, okay, man, like, not allowing yourself to be labeled for just one thing.
Most definitely. No, I mean, I think your story is definitely very helpful and empowering to a lot of people that are listening and watching. You know, we won't take up too much more of your time here with questions and stuff, but I guess kind of one of my last questions to ask, what is something that you would tell a younger person now, your younger self, or, you know, dudes that, like, obviously you say you mentor,
right,
you know, kids and stuff. So what is like the kind of piece that you really want them to grasp from when you're mentoring them as much?
I think the big thing is, and it's the misconception is, people say don't change.
Yeah.
Like, man, you better change. Because don't be afraid to evolve and try new things. And I think that's the biggest part of it is, you know, I'm a big quote person, but it's like the people who fit in read about the people who stood out. And so you got to be willing to
That's a good one.
stand out and chase your dreams, you know, because I think we all hear it, like the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. You're going to have one of them. And so I think just realizing that and saying, okay, man, this thing is really worth chasing. Like, give it a shot. You know, and it's not about failures. It's about learning experiences, learning opportunities. Like, man, listen, like, you can fail your way up. Like, you know, just make sure you don't make the same mistake twice.
For sure.
So use it as a learning tool and, you know, not being afraid to chase those things, you know. And a lot of times it's the fear of being associated with that. Man, that didn't work. Now they're going to, it's like, man, people do that all the time. You know, and you hear it on the business
all the
side.
time.
Like, man, my first business didn't work. The second one didn't work. Then all of a sudden, like, you know,
Click.
that was it. And so, you know, you just never know. And that was even with me, like in the transition of, that was one of the hard things that I had to deal with because, you know, there are a lot of no's when you go into people, and a lot of times you feel like, hey, man, these people close with me, like they gonna work with me, and it's like, nah. You know, and so I had to reconfigure my brain to think of it. It's not a no, it's just a not right now.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's, you know, frequency wise, like it wasn't meant to be, but the people that are meant to be for you, they'll be. And so, you know, I think getting comfortable with that and not expecting easy, but dealing with difficult a little bit more, a little bit better.
I got two more questions. One, resource-wise, what would you tell people? What's the best resource you've used? Book? It could be online. It could be a course. What would you look back and say, hey, this was for me a catalyst to help me think the way that I'm thinking today?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not an avid reader. I do a lot of audiobooks now. But there was two things that I think that played a huge role in that. And part of it is, like, you don't have to be an Auburn fan, but it's the Auburn Creed. Like, if you just read the language and the verbiage of it, that was that. And then it's a poem by Linda Ellis called The Dash.
The Dash.
It's just, and to kind of sum it up, it's like, what do you want to be remembered for, like in that dash? Because I know we always talk about, the first number and the last number, but what happens in between that time? Like, how impactful can you be as a person? And so I think that's what I'm chasing, is the impact, to see if I can impact as many people that, have had an impact on me.
I'm not going to ask the second question because that was a great way to finish.
Great.
The dash.
Yeah.
The Ellis. Thank you, Ronnie.
No, I
great story. Appreciate you spending the time with us today.
What can before we go, but what can, if, people want to reach out to you and get in contact with you, what can we?
I mean, social media.
Instagram.
Ronnie23
Twitter.
Brown. Yeah. Instagram. It's not X now.
X. Yeah,
X,
sorry.
And then you guys, too.
Yeah.
Like, if they get in contact with you guys, you know how to get in contact with me. So
for sure. Yes,
Thank you, Ronnie.
I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Game. Please like, subscribe, comment on your favorite platform. It helps others find the show.
Special shout out to Open Heart Media, who has helped produce Beyond the Game. Check them out at openheartmediaco.com.